Hey, it's a rainy day.
Yeah. So a normal May, April. We're still in April. Day in Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah,
But still sunshine soon. The days are long. Loving it.
yeah. By the way, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Welcome, welcome. I'm happy to be here.
It's been
I'm
a
pulling from Sunday and there we go. Okay. Good.
yeah, it's been a hot minute, I think, since we've had the podcast. So apologies for folks that have been hoping that we'd have another episode.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, we're gonna be doing a series soon that'll help make it a little bit more regular, hopefully for a little while. But
Real quick, one thing I was going to say that nobody cares about is my watch tells me when the sun sets. So I love looking at the fact that it's 8:17 today and it just keeps creeping up, to later and later. So that I love that. As you were talking about the
eight,
day.
think about that. That's great.
Yeah. No, it's thrilling. Yeah.
Oh,
But you were on vacation was it actually 2 weeks, or did it just kind of roll over, or were you hiding for that extra Sunday?
so the very first Sunday I was gone, we left on Friday morning, and then we got on the boat for the cruise Saturday, and then we got off the boat on Saturday, the following Saturday, and we
Right.
didn't get back here until Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
So not really. I
Yeah.
didn't really. Could I have gotten back for that second Sunday? Yes. No.
But not a good plan. It's like me trying to come lead worship after I did the Hood to Coast the day before. I mean, I've done it, but I'm nigh on useless, which could be par for course, some might say.
No. How did it? How did the Sundays go that I was gone? You said it went well.
Yeah. We spoke a little bit about this on Sunday, but for folks who were not party to that conversation, when it's uneventful, that's a very positive thing. So no catastrophes, no drama. So yeah, I have to say that I'm always whenever I am tasked with providing the message, that I'm reminded of just the rigor that goes into preparing, which is something that you do effectively every week, and it's a lot of work, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad that I don't do it, more than like once or twice a year.
Was there anything from that sermon that you felt really good about that you like? This was a good point that I'm glad I made, or
Hmm.
something like that. You really wanted to make sure they got, and you feel like they did.
You know, I guess the one that I want that stands out as much as anything, because it makes me think of like my mom and it makes me think of my friend Dennis, is that it's okay for you to have doubts. It's okay for you to want to be reassured. That's not a message that we're really good at communicating these days in kind of the Christian world. There's definitely an atmosphere of certainty. Like you need to, if you project anything other than certainty, it's seen as a lack of faith or weak. At least that's the way that I interpret it. So when you're in a culture that kind of projects that, then for anybody to be vulnerable with their uncertainty, really it takes, I think, a remarkable amount of courage. Right? Nobody wants to be like, I'm struggling with this. Or not, I wouldn't say nobody, but most folks are like, man, I don't want to be the one that seems like they have doubts. And when my mom came to me and was like, I have doubts, the thing that was most useful to her was for me to say, so do I.
Hmm.
She's like, really? I'm like, of course, of course. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can run into the Bible where you go, what is that?
Hmm.
I don't know how to process that, or I don't know how to deal with that. And then you can take the time to kind of unpack it. You can also just kind of go, is this really a barrier between me and kind of the ultimate focus of my faith? That isn't, I don't know that you should ignore things, but I think there are things that you're like, I don't know if this is worth spending a lot of time to understand. Some people may not agree with me when I say that, like we should just unpack it wholly, but
No, I think there's time and place for all of it. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say, you know what, I just need to not deal with that right now.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe the time will never come, and that's okay.
I don't spend much time thinking about Lot's wife, for example. That was something that for Dennis was like, he wasn't sure what to do with that. I'm like, I don't think you need to do anything with that.
Right.
It doesn't impact my faith, right? Do I think God could do that? Yeah. Did he? Probably. So it's just not a stumbling block for me whatsoever.
Yeah.
The things that do generally for me are where I allow kind of the intellectualism of the household that I grew up in, right? Where they rewarded hey, you're smart. That's what we got, right? Gets in the way of faith. Like, oh, you must be stupid because you believe these things. And it really, it hits my ego. It hits a weak spot in my ego there where I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to be perceived as dumb. Like, well, you're not dumb. There's plenty of intelligent people, people much more intelligent than me who believe and who have worked through all the doubts and those things and came out the other side and go, no, it happened.
Yeah, it really is a persistent, maybe a myth is the right word. It certainly is a line, an argument against Christianity that only dumb people believe it, when that's just not the case. It just isn't. There's very smart scientists who come to the conclusion there has to be a God. Yeah. Yeah. The quote, and I wish I could remember who said it, but it was something like, the very first drink of naturalism will make you an atheist, but at the bottom of the cup is God.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like that.
It was probably somebody like Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like a Mark Twain thing?
A little bit, yeah.
Anyways, it was somebody like that, but it's true. It's true. Anyways, yeah, doubt. I heard good things about your sermon. Was there anything about your message that you feel like you didn't communicate well?
The thing that I don't know if there's anything I didn't feel like I communicated well, but I feel like just like you experienced, sometimes there's underlying messages that come through that aren't anticipated, planned for, or like, oh, that's not what I intended for people to receive. And some of the feedback I received was really around my vulnerability and sharing, and like, I didn't know that about you. And I'm like, well, the intention wasn't to tell you my life story. And so if that's kind of what you received, then it's not supposed to be a testimony. It's supposed to provide a relatable platform that we can kind of step off to explore stuff. So that makes me think that I probably spent more time on personal journey stuff than was necessary.
But it's a good thing. I heard one of those comments, and it was a compliment.
Right. I didn't take it as criticism, but more as, oh, I really wanted you to take from this, if you're struggling with some of these things, it's okay, But anyway, you learn.
Anything about for Juan's message? I didn't get to hear that one. Was that anything of comment worth? Just trying to catch up.
His day job is working for the county in a field where he's often dealing with like homeless people or people with and just talking a little bit about like our exposure to sin, and there was. It's kind of hard because it's there was a nuance to his message that's kind of hard to explain. But he was talking a little bit about one of the things that kind of resonated with me is the idea that, under wherever you store your chemicals in your house, your cleaning stuff, right? Like in Vanessa's home, there were like Mr. Yuck stickers they put on them, so like the kids would stay away from them or whatever. But the idea that there's like a certain amount that is ingestible without doing damage to you, and comparing that to like how much sin should you allow in your life, and like basically he was comparing those two, and what I thought he was going to say was a certain amount of sin is okay, but what he really said is sin that you can control or that you're aware of, you should, to the extent possible, not tolerate that. One thing I wished he said was that a certain amount of sin is still going to occur in spite of your best efforts, and that's the tolerable amount. It's not well, I've only sinned this much today, so I can go another 5%. That kind of rationale. He's saying basically avoid that kind of rationale. The one thing I just wish is he would have tacked on, you're going to sin, do your best to avoid it. And that's what that percentage of, that tolerance percentage is for. I appreciated kind of where he was coming from. And there was definitely a very compassionate perspective that his message carried with it. So I'm not sure if you got feedback on his, but that's, I appreciated it. Yeah.
Other than that, he did okay. So good. I need to reach out to him. Any questions or thoughts on my sermon for the day, for this last Sunday? I just kind of threw something in there. Yeah,
well, holy is a word for me that is dense, right? As we're kind of comparing ourselves to God, we're, like one of the things that, like one of the big, I wouldn't say takeaways, but one of the things that resonated is the idea that we probably have more in common with Satan in regards to, we're probably closer to who Satan is and closer to, and these other gods are closer to us or to Satan than they are to God. There's just the chasm between who we are and who God is much more vast than any of us can really contemplate realistically. And so the idea of being holy, being set apart, I mean, God is way, way set apart. He's right.
Yeah.
That's enormous. So when we talk about ourselves being holy and the idea that we should be holy, you talked about the older religions, and the laws that we were given were to separate us from the worship of these other gods, and to make sure that people understood we don't act like that. We hold ourselves to a different standard, so it's very clear that you worship Yahweh,
right,
and not eating children and some other things that these other followers of other gods at that time did. So it's an interesting perspective, especially as like we carry ourselves forward. How do we, like in the modern world, how do we conduct ourselves in a way that's holy, that separates us from others? And that's something I don't know if we think as much about, other than rules that we've created, much like the Pharisees, right? And that's not the right kind of holy in my viewpoint.
Yeah, it's not a simple, straightforward answer, is it?
Well, no. No. I think it's different because it's a different culture that we live in. So separating ourselves in our current culture is different. But how do we do that in a way that when people see you, they go, "Oh, that you must be one of those people," but not in a negative way.
Right. I mean, we can always have something that clearly marks us as different. but some of those answers that we give to that is we just become weird, right?
Yeah.
We have a different vocabulary. We wear T-shirts that say Jesus stuff on it, or right. So there's all kinds of just there are weird little things that we could do. They go, oh yeah, you're a Jesus person, you're a Christian, but that's not necessarily what it means to be holy. Um, so how do you be different? I mean, some of it is the examination and analysis of the culture and understanding what that is, so that we can be different from that. Like, how do we be different in terms of love? How do we be different in terms of kindness or mercy? How do we be different in terms of integrity? These are harder questions, and maybe it's just my own unclarity on the issue. I don't know if I've spent enough time really thinking about it, but yeah.
Well, here's an example of one that's kind of recent, that I think where we get it wrong sometimes. You know, our desire to be holy isn't necessarily part of the plan, but there's like a lot of uproar about Taylor Swift's new album.
I'm not aware of, but
Well, and I've never listened to it, but like Vanessa's like Facebook feed is just full of like family members who are like, why is she creating this kind of music? And doesn't she understand that she's got, young fans? Shouldn't she be creating different kind of music? And it's like, well, you are a parent. You have the option to, it's just like you may not like the TV shows that are on. Don't watch them. And
yeah.
It's to me, it's an example of, I don't know that our energy in being set apart should be should be there, right? It's more of demonstration of love, compassion, taking care of the poor and the needy, and then you do conduct yourself in certain ways, where there's certain things that ways you should be. It's very complicated.
Doesn't it? It does to me. I mean, on one hand, I kind of get the issue, but with the if that's the issue with Taylor Swift, but it's with a lot of different celebrities. On one hand, we want them to be models for us and role models for our children, whether it's that or, I mean, famously, Charles Barkley many years ago said, I'm not a role model. I'm not going to try to be. Like, okay, but you are. On one hand, they are, and so there's a decrying, a grief over that the culture isn't what we want it to be. But at the same time, what do you expect?
Yeah.
Pick separate.
When you're a public figure, there's laws around when you're a public figure. When you lose your anonymity, you also lose, you are a target and for people's animosity, and there's influence that comes with that, and so I don't think you can say I'm not a role model because somebody looks at you that way. Right? That also doesn't mean that you necessarily have asked for the responsibility. Like, as parents, as leaders in our own community, we should not abdicate our responsibility to care for the people that we are supposed to be shepherding. So,
oh no, victim of this. No, you have responsibility. You have power to make different choices. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is is coming back to the question of how do we present ourselves as set apart, holy people in today's culture? The answer is, I don't know. It's complicated, and I don't think just because I wear a cross on my neck or I have a what would Jesus do bracelet or something like that. That's window dressing.
Yeah, that. Yeah, don't accept that as an answer.
Right.
That's a yeah. Yeah, especially wearing a cross or having a Jesus sticker on your car. No, that's not witnessing. It's not going to help people come to Jesus, and it's not necessarily going to. Yeah, that's not holy. Being just odd, just to be odd, isn't helpful. So yeah, yeah, and one of my points on the holiness was is just not to assume that God is like this person that you know, because a lot of us read into God that God is like the church I grew up, or he's like my father or my mother or some other figure in my life. And it's so easy to do that. We kind of do it unconsciously. And yet, because he's different, you got to be careful doing that.
Yeah. I get it. The whole idea that when we say dad or Abba or whatever, that there is it's very certainly a relational quality.
Right.
It's just, it's different than our earthly father.
Grew up with.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's some sort of parallel. There is sort of a connection, but to just simply read into that you got to be careful with that, because it's there's good things with our earthly fathers, and there's bad things with our earthly fathers. No matter how good of a father you had, um, there's still something. So I talked about holiness. I talked about that God is good. I talked about him being relational, that he's fundamentally a relational God, and reconciling. Those are kind of the 4 points. And I got all, by the way, because I didn't talk about this, I got all of that really out of Genesis chapter 1, which is the main point of Genesis 1, is to tell us who God is. It's not necessarily to answer historical questions. That's not the point.
Right. Yeah, I've got. I think I've actually brought up the slide. So holy, relatable, good, and reconciling. And if I was going to answer that question I asked earlier, the one I would point to as much as anything, I mean, we can look at those and say, how can we be holy today? And one is be good.
Be good.
Be kind, demonstrate integrity, take care of people as you're able to.
Be benefit, thriving of the people around you.
Yeah. Inspire people.
That's what good does.
Yeah. So
he's setting society, the garden for the human beings to just be fruitful and to multiply, and just like a tree, just explode with growth, thrive. That's good.
Yeah.
It's however that looks in a person's life is, how do you do that? Right.
Well,
in this, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the idea of reconciling. First of all, because it's active, it's an active word.
Yeah.
He reconciled, is reconciling, and will reconcile. It's the idea is that it's all covered. I actually had some feedback from somebody. One of the points that you made was that we rebel. This is obviously me paraphrasing, that God asks us to live a certain way. And sometimes one of the issues that we have in our culture is people say, well, sure, I believe that, but this is what I want to do anyway. Or I think you said the atheist is, if there was irrefutable proof that God exists, would you follow him? Well, only if his morals aligned. Right, yeah. Right. And there was just kind of the comment I received is, at least the way I interpreted it is, so if I am knowingly sinning and not changing, where does that fit kind of within the path of reconciliation?
Well, that's a whole different section of conversation, right?
Yeah, that's a very. I didn't really have an answer. I mean, it's a complex question. It's, the thing is I know there are things in my life that are sinful, I mean, like I can see like whether it's greed or, I mean, there are things that come in and I'm like, oh, I need to take care of that. Right. It's like I should eat better or I need to exercise more. And I'm not saying that eating better and exercising more or those are sins. It's just like recognizing there are things that I could actively do to kind of take a step closer to the holiness that he wants from us. And I'm not doing it.
I think my best answer is going to the and I don't know if Juan talked about that, but 1 John 1:9 it says is that the attitude of the person who's in a good relationship with God, that confessing of sin is a participle. It's an active, ongoing thing. It's not a one-time thing. I think it's, do you want to be in a good relationship with God? Knowing that you're not always going to do it right. He knows you're not going to do it right. He knew when he called you all the sin you were going to do and all the ways you're going to continue to rebel. And yet, what's your heart? Do you want to be, or do you want to run from God? And I know there's moments where you want to run from God. We all have that. I mean, for some people, as we started our conversation, there's doubts over, does he exist? And for others, it's the issue is, but I still sin a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Does he still love me even if I keep sinning? And for both cases, I think God's super gracious.
Yeah, it's tough because I can see people arguing. Oh, so you're giving permission to continue to sin because he continues to, right? And I know that's not what you're saying. And sometimes we will make choices that are not a one-time choice, but an ongoing choice that we know we're off base on, and maybe it's not where we want to be, and we aren't in a position yet to change, and that doesn't mean that we're damned. It's like I'm not running away from God. I'm heading a little bit off of the compass path, and I know I need to get back. Or I'm not explaining it very well, but
I think just quoting. I know there's a little bit of a debate over it, but Paul in Romans 7, where he says, "I know, I do the sin that I don't want to do. Who is going to help me? Oh, wretched man that I am. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ."
Yeah.
I'm going to do the sin I don't really want to do, and that's the Christian life.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's the reality of the Christian life. That people who think that you cannot sin, I think they're arrogant and they don't see their own sin, and it just loads up weight on people's lives. It's tragic. You can't live that way. Of course, I'm going to sin a lot. This is a passionate point for me. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate that you speak so passionately about it, because this goes back to the need for that I was trying to preach about. The need for reassurance is sometimes we forget the promises that have been given to us, or the things that we have learned we need to relearn. Because when you're mentioning Paul and Romans, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. And it's like, I wish those words had been with me when I heard that feedback from that person. Like, oh yeah, so I could provide reassurance, so I can be that source of reassurance. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It's like hearing a song that you've heard 500 times, and you hear it the 501st and you go, oh gosh, yeah, of course. I didn't even think about it that way.
Well, I hope people are encouraged and stay encouraged and hang in there. This next week we're going to start getting into Ephesians, and I'm going to begin by actually going back to Genesis again. And part of the point is like, okay, we're screwed up people, we're messed up, we're going to continue to sin, and we need to acknowledge that. Any understanding of how to have a better marriage that ignores the fallenness of humanity is doomed to fail.
Good. All right. I need to pick out some songs then.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and you guys take care. And we look. Thanks for connecting. I haven't talked to you in so long.
Well, we're back on track. So
Back on track.
I'm grateful for it. It was a good conversation. I hope people appreciated it, and feedback is always welcome.
All right. You guys take care. We'll see you on Sundays.
Take care.